Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I am your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA. It's episode number 33 of Controversial Issues with Rabbi Chaim Coffman from the Holy Land. Tonight's topic is going to be, why do the Jews think they are so special? Paraphrased, of course. Rabbi, welcome back to the show. Good to see you again.
Oh, it's good to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, same here.
Welcome, everyone.
Yeah. That's awesome. Hey, real quick question, because, not too many people get a chance to go traveling. Hey, but speaking of traveling, April 9th through the 17th or something like that, we're going to, Rabbi Singer and I are going to Israel. If you want to jump on board, you better get on quick because we've only got about 4 signed on. We've got about maximum of like 25, 30 seats available, and we got to have a certain amount by the end of January. Otherwise, we'll have to postpone the trip for next year. So anyway, if you want to go to Israel and go on a nice little tour, maybe run into Rabbi Coffman along the way.
Oh, you don't want to run into me, not in a dark alley, not anytime. But if you happen to be here around my neighborhood, we'll see what we can do.
There you go. That's cool. So so I guess the title of the show isn't necessarily precisely what it has to be, but a lot of people. There are a lot of people out there, especially in the Christian community. From Jehovah's Witnesses to Seventh-day Adventists. I've heard so much anti-Semitism coming from those groups, just at the mere, when you even say the word Jewish, they just they coil up like a snake ready to strike. And it's like, the thing is, as a Christian growing up in the churches that I've been to, fortunately the churches I've been to were fairly respectable towards the Jewish people, but not a lot of the people attending there were. And they were very bitter to the idea that God actually has a chosen people, and this might be just a good time to explain what we need to know about all that.
Okay, sounds good. Someone I mentioned earlier, in a class, that someone once told me in order that the Jews should stick together and be closer, etc. There should be more anti-Semitism in the world. So I was like, we don't have enough, right? So we need actually, we need a heck of a lot more. There's certainly, since Esav and Yaakov, and that's where it's where it sort of started, and it's never going to end until till the Messiah comes. But that was for Jewish unity. Please, we need more pain. We need more people to hate us, to kill us, to burn us. That's going to bring the Jewish people together. Well, probably not. Probably not. So there is. I don't know if it's so controversial. It does tick a lot of people off, though, because
right.
They'll say, well, the Jewish people think they're so great, and they're God's chosen people. Well, keep in mind, as the Talmud tells us, as the Medrash says, God went to all the nations before he came to the Jewish people. And he asked them if they want the Torah. So they came to the Christians, right? They came to Esav and they said, you want the Torah? They say, what's written in it? So they said, the Torah says, don't kill. He says, what do you mean? It says by Esav, they're going to live by the sword. If they're going to live by the sword, how could I want the Torah? They come to the Arabs, they come to Yishmael, and they say, God says, you want the Torah? They say, what's written in it? It says, don't steal. But it says, by Ishmael, the Muslims will hate this because it says that he's a wild ass of a man. His hand is in everybody's hand. Their hand is in his. So he said, what do you mean? That's our living. That's what we do. We steal, right? Hey, wear my hubcaps, right? So at the end of the day, God comes to Jewish people. And God says, you want the Torah? They said, sure. They said, you want to know what's written in it? They said, we don't care. Right? They said, Naseh v'nishma. They said, we will hear, and then we will do. So from that time, and even before, because God knew he was going to choose the Jewish people, nonetheless, the Jewish people are known as the chosen people. So I sort of gave it an allusion to this. I spoke a little bit about it earlier. And I mentioned that, what does it mean? What does it mean that the Jews are chosen? So many years ago, 50, 60 years ago in Berlin, of all places, there was a discussion by the professors. I don't know, I guess they had nothing better to do. And they had this discussion about what makes a Jew, right? Are they a religion? Are they, are they a race? What exactly are they? So some said they're a religion, some said they're a race, some said they're other things. And then this old Polish Jew comes in and he says in Yiddish, which won't be really hard to translate, he goes, a Yid is a Yid, right? A Jew is a Jew. That's it. So everyone looked at him and said, oh, you know what? He's right. So what differentiates a Jew from a non-Jew? The only thing that differentiates a Jew from a non-Jew is the Torah and the mitzvahs that he keeps. If you go back in history, Mr. Haman, Mr. Haman himself tells Achashverosh, he said, listen, there's this nation, they're spread out, they don't eat the same foods that you do, they don't drink, if you touch their wine, they won't drink it, it's like spiritual cooties, or whatever you want to call it, and they do all these different things. It's better that we shouldn't have them in the world, right? It's better that we should wipe them, we should wipe them off the face of the map. So Achashverosh says, sounds like a good idea, right? Anti-Semitism still existing in a major way, and that we have the story of, Purim. But at the end of the day, the Torah says that the Jews are different. We have different holidays, right? We have the Sabbath. We have different laws about what we're allowed to eat, what animals are allowed to eat, how we're allowed to eat them. All these different things. But nowhere in the Torah does it say, and this is where the mistake is, right? So all you people making this mistake, take notes and listen. And that is that being chosen does not mean that we're better. What differentiates us is by the mitzvahs and the Torah that we keep. So if a Jew doesn't keep the Torah, right, that's 90% of world Jewry today. If the majority of Jews don't keep the Torah, can you tell the difference by the way they dress or by how they act between a Jew and a non-Jew? Right? Will you be able to tell the difference? So when I was first engaged, I was first engaged before I got married. There was tradition in our family by the famous Boston Marathon, usually the second or third Monday on Patriots Day, Monday in April. And we had close family friends that were the 18-mile mark, right? They called it Heartbreak Hill. It was a very steep hill, and then they went another 8 or so miles to the finish line. So one of the things that my wife made a comment by the people that were there was that you couldn't tell the Jews from the non-Jews. Right? You couldn't tell how they acted, you couldn't tell how they spoke, you couldn't tell by the way they dressed. Right? There was no distinction, so to speak. So in that case, in those cases, in the majority of cases of world Jewry today, what differentiates a Jew from a non-Jew? Nothing, right? Not by what they eat because they don't keep kosher. Not by who they marry because the vast majority, 70, 80% intermarry. So if we're looking at it in those terms, it's not a club just to join. There are people, there are Jews, secular and religious, we won't discriminate, which will say we are better than non-Jews. That's discrimination, right? That, no one said that the Torah doesn't say we're better. Right, that's where the problem is. It does sound elitist, I agree. It sounds elitist, but if you look in the context, and as we always say, everything is in context, you have to say that when God says they're chosen, it's because we chose Him. Somebody else wanted God. They're like, can I smoke? No, you can't smoke. Oh, I'm not interested. Sunday football? No, you can't gladiator, right? You can't even follow us. It's forbidden. Forget it. Right, so it has nothing to do with the fact that I think I'm better, right? And again, it does sound pretty bad. It definitely does sound bad. There's no question about that. But if you look at the context of what it is, it has nothing to do with that. And we are supposed to be different, right? The Torah makes clear that we are supposed to be different. How we act, how we speak, what we eat, all these things. So if we're supposed to be different, how can that mean that we're better? There will be people that'll say, they think they're better, and it's like a nice group to belong to, even though we've been gassed and killed and murdered and all these different things, that I hear clear. But what in that context makes it sound, like we're better? The context says, yeah, you're chosen because you chose God. You're chosen because you want to keep the Torah and you don't care what's written in it. That has nothing to do with being better. Again, Jews were our own worst enemy, abuse that. Right? They totally abuse that. There are some that don't say, yeah, we are better. We are superior. Sounds like the Germans, doesn't it? We are superior because God, we are God's chosen people. But if you don't keep any of the mitzvahs, or you only give a lip service, what makes you any different than a non-Jew? Not only that, if a Jew doesn't keep Shabbos, for instance, he desecrates Shabbos in public, he's got the status in many ways like a non-Jew. Right? If he touches your wine and it's not cooked, you can't drink it. Again, spiritual cooties, right? 101 or 101A. So you have all these different things that can happen if you turn away and you turn your back. Right? You turn your back against God. If you do that, then what makes you any different than anybody else? It's because God gave you, a special soul, but you're abusing that soul. You're not using it the way it should. Right? You're destroying it through the body. So if you're destroying the soul through the body, there's nothing connecting you. And the most important question you may ever ask in your lifetime is if I put mustard or ketchup on my hot dog. Like, mustard, ketchup. And there's nothing to do with spirituality. All these people are apathetic. It's like starting a Jeep with a 9-volt. You can try that, or try a Humvee with that, with a 9-volt. It's not going to go. These people are going to get wiped off the face of the map. So it has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with being better. It has everything to do with taking responsibility. Can a Jew shirk his responsibility? 100%. Right? He can choose to break his covenant. Doesn't mean God's covenant is broken. Right? Because it says in Jeremiah chapter 30, that's where the Christians get this from. Right? Jeremiah says he's going to make a new covenant. Right? But if you look at what Jeremiah says before that, he's giving chastisement. He's rebuking the Jewish people because they're not holding according to the original covenant. So what's the new covenant? The new covenant cannot be a new covenant, as the Christians say, because the Torah says you can't add or subtract to the Torah. And you can't go against the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu. How do we know you can't go against the prophecy? Because how did Moshe Rabbeinu get his stamp of approval? Got it from God himself. Right? It's nothing better than that. So if God gave his stamp of approval and Moshe's just receiving what God said and he's writing it down and it hasn't changed, and he writes in there you cannot add or subtract, what in the world are you doing with a new tradition? Right? A new covenant. It can't be a new covenant. He's talking about the old covenant. Go look at the context. Go read what Jeremiah says over there. Right? So in that sense, we're talking about reconnecting. Right? Reconnecting like the old covenant was. Does that sound elitist? It doesn't sound elitist, at all. It's reconnecting what God wants us to do. So any non-Jew, if you want to be part of it, you can go through conversion. Right. They're going to say, I don't want to go through conversion. I still want to eat beef jerky. Okay, so eat beef jerky. What do I care? Be a Noahide, super Noahide, whatever you want to call yourself. You don't have to convert.
So
does that mean if you don't convert? 1 second. So that means if you don't convert, you're not better. There are different obligations between a Jew and a non-Jew.
Right. Okay, so I noticed there's something in the New Testament that mentions specifically about the Jews in Romans 3. It said, what advantage then has the Jew, or what profit is there of circumcision? It says, much in every way, chiefly because unto the Jews were committed the oracles of God. So there's obviously something.
We are the champions.
So it's obviously a very known thing, And one thing that I find interesting in the division of the kingdoms, even if you take it way back, right? So you had the northern kingdom. Once you had the split, you had the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The southern kingdom was basically the Levites, right? The Levites were part of that, Judah and Benjamin, right. And so they all became Yehudi, or however that works. And they were out of both kings. And correct me as I go along, because I'm not sure how accurate what I'm saying is, but this helps it make sense to me. So out of the northern kingdom and all their kings, they never had one righteous king like ever. But the southern kingdom had good and bad. But in general, the southern kingdom, right? And so the southern kingdom were the ones who were keeping Torah. They were the ones who were it was surviving through the southern kingdom. So in the diaspora, however it worked, and all these tribes just dissipated. My guess is they probably didn't care about their autonomy. They were probably intermarrying. They were probably doing all this other stuff. But the people who were actually exercising Torah, who they was entrusted to, they were practicing things the way they were supposed to, the way y'all do today, which is securing marriages and securing bloodlines and things of this nature. Right. And so I don't know why it's so hard for people to accept seeing the actual history of the Jewish people. Why is it so hard for them?
Because they don't look at the history. All they, what do the Christians, what do other people do? They take everything out of context, right? They rip it out of context and they want to make us look bad. Why? Because what did Hitler, Yamach Shemo, may his name be blotted out, may he rot wherever he is, right? Why did he want to kill the Jews so bad, right? What his book was based on? His book Mein Kampf was based on the 95 Theses of Martin Luther. Most people probably aren't aware of that. Martin Luther was a big-time anti-Semite. Big time anti-Semite. So that being said, what was Hitler's, what was his beef with the Jewish people? He said the Jewish people are the conscience of the world. Now there is truth to that, because who brought absolute morality to the world? We did. Right? It came through Abraham, passed it down to Isaac, passed it down to Jacob. Right? So he said they are the conscience of the world. He's right. Right? But for whatever reason, God gave him a power in order to, rally up the masses and, decimate, a good chunk of the Jewish people. Even that being said, the guy was a madman, a total madman. Never make fun of someone's painting when he's younger, right? Yeah. But he was, he was an absolute madman. At the same time, he understood something fundamental, right? Even if he was God's messenger and this is what he was supposed to do and whatever the case was, why would he make such a statement? Why would he say they're the conscience of the world, right? Because there's some underlying element that they think we're better. They think they're better than everyone else. But the only reason they can make that claim, and again, it's not better, it's being different, having more obligation, but there's only one possible way they can ever make that claim. The only way they can make that claim is because God says it in the Torah. Either you believe God said it, Moshe wrote it, or you don't. So if you don't believe it, it's just a bunch of hogwash. It was a committee, 5 writers and a redactor, or whatever the case is. However the academics, are going to see it. They're going to say it makes everyone else look bad. They're going to say, oh, they're elitist, they're this, they're that. But anyone who wants a part of it, we're not saying like the Christians say and like the Muslims say. If you don't believe in us, you're going to fry in hell forever. Before JC was born, right? Was there time? Doesn't seem like there was time. There's no time. There was no history. It's like nothing happened, right? And if you don't believe in him, and this is the hardest thing for a Christian to do, is to leave JC. Because if you don't leave him, you're going to fry in hell forever. Now, what do the Muslims say? So the Muslims say, oh, the Christians got it wrong, and for sure the Jews got it wrong because they make us look bad because of Yishmael, right? If you see what happened to Yishmael in the Torah. Be that as it may, what are they claiming? If you don't believe in us, you're going to fry in hell forever. Not only that, we're going to kill you. Not only are you going to fry in hell, we're going to kill you as well. So what happened before Muhammad's flight from Mecca to Medina? What happened in history before that? Seemingly nothing. All history stopped and nothing happened. Before that, it's like the world didn't exist. So if that's true, you look at Judaism. Judaism is universal, right? If you want to join it, okay, there's certain criteria you have to go through. If you don't want to join it, fine. There are things you can do, certainly as a non-Jew. We're so universal when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, right? And we talk about judgment, the judgment of the world. Non-Jews don't know this, but they're getting judged as well. So in the prayer book, in the Rosh Hashanah prayer book, by the Tekiyas, by when they blow the shofar, after they blow the shofar for the 3 parts of the additional service for Malchios, Shofars, and Zochronos, which talk about God's kingship, shofar blowing different times in history, talks about God's remembering the Jewish people. It says afterwards, Yom Haras Olam. This is the day God created the world, right? And God created man. Not that he created the Jews. Not that he created Moshe Rabbeinu. Not that he created Avram. He created the world. General. World. So that means that anybody wants to be a part of it, they can be a part of it. That doesn't sound so elitist like all these other religions, like, believe in us, you're going to fry in hell forever. Right? We're not saying that. We're saying there's a way to do it. If you don't want to do it, that's your choice. And you'll pay a price. Right? But you can choose to join, be a Jew, take on all the obligations, or you can be a Noahide. You can take on some of them, right? Or you take on more, whatever a Noahide has to do. But at the same time, no one's putting a gun to your head saying that either you do it or you die, or you do it or like nothing else happened before history. Now, then you're going to tell me, oh, but look at this verse. And this verse says, you're a nation of Kohanim, you're a nation of priests, you're the chosen people. That sounds so elitist. It does sound elitist to a point, but if you see these other things in context, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense because it's universal for everybody. You want a part of it, you can join. You want less of a part of it, fine. Right? But there's things for both Jews and non-Jews, obligations that they have to do. That does not sound elitist. So then you have to look at the verse and say, okay, what does this verse mean? Being chosen, does it mean being better? Does it mean being elitist? It can't be, because it's universal for all mankind, for all generations. If it's universalist in a certain way, according to the way God wants it and the way it's set up, that does not sound elitist. So what do? What do most people do? They pick and choose. And when they look at the Torah and they say, oh, this means like this and this means like that, and the Christians will say, we have our own oral tradition. We don't need the rabbis. Yeah, of course you need the rabbis, because you wouldn't know how to read the text without rabbinic vowels. That's kind of picking and choosing, isn't it? Of course it's picking and choosing. Right? They'll never admit that, but that, how are they going to read the Torah without vowels? Oh, you have to rely on the rabbi, but we're only going to rely on certain things. Right. Okay, good luck. You go pick and choose, right? Just admit what you're doing. But at the this has nothing to do. This has nothing to do with being better. Not only that, I'll give you historical proof, right? So people say, oh, you can't argue with the rabbi. He's got a degree from Columbia in history. It's like, ooh, he's got a degree in history. Don't mess, right? So if you look historically at what the Jewish people go through the book of Kings, right? Go through all the prophets. You're going to see if the Jewish people do the right thing, everything's good. If the Jewish people don't do the right thing, what happens? I just gave it away. They get punished. And they can get punished severely for even a minor infraction. So if that's true, does that sound like you're a chosen nation? You're so much better than everybody else that if you look at history, the Jews have been probably the most persecuted people in the world. And not only that, they've been spread out among all the nations. Everything's been taken away, and we're still here, which is pretty darn miraculous. Remember when I was first married, I was in Europe, went on a kosher tour, and the first place we went is we were in Rome. When we were in Rome, one of the first places we saw was the Arch of Titus. Right? Anyone's ever seen the Arch of Titus? Right, the big thing for that you see Titus, this the great warrior. The Romans that took, destroyed Jerusalem, took the vessels from the temple, etc. Right? Some of them are in Rome. All you have to do is do a little, spring cleaning in the Vatican. Sure you'll find some things in there. In either case, we're the Romans today. They don't exist. All we have is some Roman artifacts. You got the Colosseum, you got some, other architectural type things left. Do the Romans exist? They don't exist anymore. You look at the Greeks, we're living in a Greek world today, through the way we study, in the gymnasium and all these different things, aqueducts, as they would say, right? Give the aqueducts, right? So you have the aqueducts, you got roads, you got education, all these different things. Where are the Greeks? They disappeared. Right? They all disappeared. So all these nations that have persecuted the Jews at one time or another, they're all gone. The Jews have been dispersed in all the nations, which seemingly is a recipe for disaster. How could a nation ever survive being dispersed among all the nations. It's only because they kept the Torah. But we're still here. So remember this tour guide going on about the Arch of Titus, and saying, well, we're the Romans today. And everyone's saying, Am Yisrael Chai, we're all part of the Jewish people. We're still alive, which boggles the mind. Historically doesn't make any logical sense, because if you do it to any other nation, there's a tremendous melting pot in many other countries. They disappear. They, totally disappear. Look what happened to America. All these different groups came to America. They're virtually, they disappeared. Okay, you have different pockets of people in different places, fine, but essentially they were part of the melting pot. And if the Jewish people, same thing. They also integrated in. So what happened? 90% of them, are disappearing off the face of the map, spiritually. So when you look at Jewish history, right, this is just a historical perspective. You can take it for what it is. If you look at it historically, being chosen certainly doesn't mean you're better. Certainly doesn't mean you're going to be elitist. Both temples are destroyed. All the miracles that happened in Israel with the temples and, all the great wars that the Jewish people won because God fought for them, etc. Once they started going away from the Torah, going away from tradition, they didn't have divine protection anymore. They got decimated, in so many different ways. So if you look at it from a historical perspective, how in the world can anyone say that the chosen people mean we're better? Look, that's why anybody wants to convert. I say either you're 100% crazy or you're the real deal. Why? Because if you see what Jews have gone throughout history, the Jewish people, a person wasn't allowed to convert in the time of King David and Solomon. Very simply because there were miracles going on left and right. If there are absolute miracles going on, your free will is taken away. What happens when the Messiah comes? You're also not going to be allowed to convert because there'll be open miracles like what happened in Egypt. So anyone who wants to convert, you better jump on the bandwagon now. We don't have too much time left. So, but everything else in between, Jewish people have still been in exile, right? We're still in exile, even living in the land of Israel. It's not too hard to see, that we're still living in exile today. So I'll change the question now, which I'm very good at doing, and that is why are these idiots calling us and say, oh, you're the chosen people. You're so elitist. Look at Jewish history. Don't forget the 615th commandment. Don't be a moron. Look at Jewish history. Jewish history proves out it has nothing to do with being better. Because the Jewish people have been gassed and killed and murdered in pogroms and Holocaust all throughout history. How does that show that we're better than everyone else? Just the opposite. If you look at history and we'd be like the Romans, and we'd still be around, conquered most of the world and still be in charge, you have a claim. Because we've always been on top. All right, a little bit down, more up than down. Like if you're 80% on top, and 20% down, that's pretty good statistics throughout history. That has never happened in the for the Jewish people. They've been up at a certain amount of time, right? The temple existed, right, for a certain amount of time. Then it was destroyed. Then it existed again. Then it was destroyed. And that's it. We are still in exile. Right, so the bone of contention is if you look at the cycle of Jewish history, when it comes to wars and pogroms and all that, who in the world in their right mind is going to say, "Oh, you elitist, you think you're better"? How I could say if you look at all the Nobel prizes over the years, right? Who's won significantly more than anybody else? Jews. Who gives more charity in the world, multiply it by infinity compared to any other religious group? Yeah. Jews do. Does that mean they're better? It doesn't mean they're better. What it means, Jews are very studious. So they're not going to learn Torah properly. So they'll study mathematics. They'll study physics. They'll be at the top of any other field because they have this drive. If you don't use that drive spiritually, okay, so you'd be writing books on tax law. Right. You'd be world famous doing, writing some economic treatise on who knows what. And again, I'm not saying that's, not necessarily, important. Is it more important than learning Torah? There's nothing more important than learning Torah. But if you don't use your brains for that, what are you going to use it for? Use it for something else. So I could say, in a certain way, look at the Jews exponentially, how much charity they give. Look at all the Nobel Prizes they have won, exponentially more than anybody else. Doesn't make any rational sense.
Right,
Does
right,
that mean we're better? Does that mean we're better? It doesn't mean we're better.
right.
Right? That would be being elitist. Then you can say, oh, this Rabbi Coffman, he's got a chip on his shoulder. Yeah, I got a few chips, pretty big ones also. But you're going to say, oh, he thinks he's so much better. Look at all the things the Jewish people have done. You look in any science and mathematics, any of these things, Jews are at the top. There's no question about it. Does that mean we're better? Doesn't mean we're better. Right? Doesn't mean we're better at all. It just means that if and this is the scary thing, and that is if you don't focus on what you should, meaning learning Torah, so what are you going to focus on? You focus on secular things, secular education, because every Jew, it's ingrained in them from way back when that you should have a good education, right? A good, solid education. My son, the doctor, the lawyer, the accountant, the this, the that. It's a big thing in the secular world, right? To have a degree, to have multiple degrees. Why? For its own sake, not just to make money, right? So there is something in the air about that, but that has nothing, to do with Torah, right? And it would be very easy, to pick out different fields and show where Jews are and all, throughout history and what they've done. That would be called being elitist. But by saying God gave us the Torah, we chose him and he chose us, and nobody else wanted him, that's not being elitist. We took what no one else wanted.
Right.
For better or for worse, God chose us, we chose him, and that's it. What does that have to do? What does that have to do with being better? Now, we're our own worst enemy, and there are plenty of Jews who walk around, religious or not, with a chip on their shoulder. That's elitist. That's wrong, right? According to everybody, that's wrong. But this has nothing, to do with that, and especially if you look in Jewish history, it's totally the opposite, because the Jews have not been on top for very long at all. Now it's coming back. We have, Jewish communities sprouting up and rabbinic scholars in a lot of places and all these great things going on. We're still in exile, no question. And we're still despised, even though, Trump has a, daughter that converted, and even former President Clinton's got a daughter married a Jew. Okay, intermarriage at its finest, right? So you see that Jews will intermarry even with the higher echelons in society. Big deal. Now it just means it's more in vogue for a non-Jew to marry a Jew in those circles. Does that mean so some people say that's great. So the Jews have really made it. Look, you got somebody like Clinton's going to have his daughter marry a high-profile businessman. Very nice. What does that do for the Jewish people? That just means we just made it in a certain way, but that's the kiss of death, because, there's a great book in English. I think it's still out there. It's called Epics of the Messiah by Rabbi Hanan Wasserman. Hashem Yikam Damo, that God should avenge his blood. He was killed during World War II, a student of the Chofetz Chaim. One of the things he said in this book of the Epics of the Messiah and what's supposed to happen in the end of days, and other things, one of the things he said is if you try and be more like a non-Jew, in other words, you intermarry, you become part of their schools, and go to the universities and all these different things, the non-Jew is going to hate you 10 times more. Right? You want to be more like them, they are going to despise you. And you see, that's exactly what happened. It's exactly what happened in Germany. Because the secular Jews that were being rounded up during the Holocaust said, what are you, crazy? What do you want from us? Why are you gassing us? We're not different. We're the same. We went to universities. We married your women. We did all these different things. What's the problem? You want those other Jews wear those funny hats and those funny strings. They all have long beards. They look different. They eat different. All these different things. They're the ones you want, not us. So what did Yamach Shemo say? He said, you got Jewish blood, even from your father, even if you're not legally Jewish, we're going to take all of you because you're all collective. Right? All Jews are responsible one for the other, which you never, ever see in any other nation. I mentioned this earlier. So imagine in Brooklyn, say, yo, Giuseppe! He steals someone's hubcaps. He gets thrown in jail. Say, that's it. No more cannolis. We're not going to eat any more cannolis. We're going to put the Italians out of business. That never happens. Ever. It's only by the Jews. And if a Jew does it, whether he's secular, whether he's religious, which makes it look 10 times worse, if he gets caught, everybody's going to say the Jews this, the Jews that, the Jews the other thing. That doesn't make any logical sense. We're 1/1000th the world's population. Why is everybody always picking on me? Why? It doesn't make any logical sense. Anti-Semitism doesn't have to make logical sense. But at the end of the day, at the end of the day, it has nothing to do with being better. That's, and if you look at throughout history, history bears that out. No, I don't think there's any question about that.
All right. Well, I think next week we may do a show basically on conversion. Should a person convert? Why, or even for people who think they want to convert, why do you want to convert? Just hash out a whole bunch of different details and angles and points of views. From both sides.
I love the Jewish people. I want to be part of them. I love eating falafel. Come on. Well, of course, why would you want to convert?
Right. I heard that when you convert, your jokes all of a sudden become funny. That's what Rabbi Tovia Singer told me.
That could be. I don't know. I've been Jewish my whole life, and my kids have already heard all my jokes. They don't think it's funny second, third, fourth, fifth time. So
that's great. Cool. Well,
I still think they're funny. But I guess if you heard them too many times, then then that's it.
Well, cool. Well, I think we pretty much probably covered everything that we could for now. So, and I haven't seen any questions pop up on YouTube or anything. And so,
I haven't ticked off enough people yet? Oh, come on!
No.
I was doing good. My Charlie Brown invitation. Wow, everybody. I could get better, but okay.
That's funny.
No questions. Everyone's good. So,
yes,
so I think we're all right.
We'll let you off early this week, Rabbi. So appreciate you helping us out with all these hot topics, man. So next week we'll plan on just talking about conversion and all the ins and outs and the pros and cons. Sound good?
Sounds good. If anyone's got a better topic, they can, send it to you and send you all your hate mail. All right, send it to him, not to me.
Yeah. Thanks for respinning that. I think I told everybody last week to send it all to you. So
send it to you, right?
Yeah,
I'm only repaying the favor. It's not even Purim yet. Come on. We're just getting started.
That's funny. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and be sure to turn on the notification bell next to the subscribe button. That even goes for Rabbi's. Pretty much every YouTube channel works the same. And so if you subscribe, that's not enough. That just means that you're part of the fan club. If you want the information, you have to turn on the notifications. So be sure to do that on Tanakh Talk as well as Rabbi Coffman and anybody else that you like following. Rabbi Singer, John and Jason, whoever it is, turn on that notifications bell. It's really, really handy. Okay, well, I guess we'll turn it off for today, and we'll see you same time, same place next week, Rabbi. And I'll see all you wonderful viewers out there as well. So, shalom, shalom, and Shavua Tov. Take care, everyone.
Shavua Tov, shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom. Take care. Bye.
חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה. אני אתה אתם תמיד תמיד כולם ביחד. חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה,